Yun SE-PYONG the Wizard. Yun Se-PYONG was a man of soul who lived to the age of over 90. When he was young, he loved archery and went as military attaché to the capital of the Mings, Nanking. There he met a prophet who taught him the Wangjong, or sacred book of the Taoists, and thus he learned their laws and practiced their teachings. His life was written by So-Kwang. Chan Yu-chi, the magician of Songdo. Chan Yu-chi was a magician of Songdo who lived about 1550 and was associated in his life with Shin Kwang-hu. At the latter's residence one day when a friend called, Kwang-hu asked Chan to show them one of his special feats. A little later, they brought in a table of rice for each of the party, and Chan took a mouthful of his, and then blew it out toward the courtyard, when the rice changed into beautiful butterflies that flew gaily away. Chang Osa used to tell a story of his father, who said that one day Chan came to call upon him at his house and asked for a book entitled The 2SI, which he gave to him. "I had no idea," said the father, "that he was dead and that it was his ghost. I gave him the book, though I did not learn till afterwards that he had been dead for a long time." The history of famous men says, he was a man who understood heretical magic and other dangerous teachings by which he deceived the people. He was arrested for this and locked up in prison in Sichuan, Wanghai Province, and there he died. His burial was ordered by the prison authorities, and later, when his relatives came to exhume his remains, they found that the coffin was empty. This and the story of Imbang do not agree as to his death, and I am not able to judge between them. JSG. The transformation of men into beasts, bugs, and creeping things comes from Buddhism. One seldom finds it in Taoism. The story. Yun Se-PYONG was a military man who rose to the rank of minister in the days of King Chungjong. It seems that Yun learned the doctrine of magic from a passing stranger, whom he met on his way to Peking in company with the envoy. When at home, he lived in a separate house, quite apart from the other members of his family. He was a man so greatly feared that even his wife and children dared not approach him. What he did in secret, no one seemed to know. In winter, he was seen to put iron cleats under each arm and to change them frequently, and when they were put off, they seemed to be red hot. At the same time, there was a magician in Korea called Chan Yu-chi, who used to go about Seoul plying his craft. So skillful was he that he could even simulate the form of the master of a house and go freely into the women's quarters. On this account, he was greatly feared and detested. Yun heard of him on more than one occasion and determined to rid the earth of him. Chan heard also of Yun and gave him a wide berth, never appearing in his presence. He used frequently to say, "I am a magician only, Yun is a god." On a certain day, Chan informed his wife that Yun would come that afternoon and try to kill him, and so, said he, "I shall change my shape in order to escape his clutches. If anyone comes asking for me, just say that I am not at home." He then metamorphosed himself into a beetle and crawled under a crock that stood overturned in the courtyard. When evening began to fall, a young woman came to Chan's house, a very beautiful woman too, and asked, "Is the Master Chan at home?" The wife replied, "He has just gone out." The woman laughingly said, "Master Chan and I have been special friends for a long time, and I have an appointment with him today. Please say to him that I have come." Chan's wife, seeing a pretty woman come thus, and ask in such a familiar way for her husband, flew into a rage and said, "The rascal has evidently a second wife that he has never told me of. What he said just now is all false." So she went out in a fury and with a club smashed the crock. When the crock was broken, there was the beetle underneath it. Then the woman who had called suddenly changed into a bee and flew at and stung the beetle. Chan, metamorphosed into his accustomed form, fell over and died, and the bee flew away. Yun lived at his own house as usual, when suddenly he broke down one day in a fit of tears. The members of his family in alarm asked the reason. He replied, "My sister living in Chula province has just at this moment died." He then called his servants and had them prepare funeral supplies, saying, "They are poor where she lives, and so I must help them." He wrote a letter, and after sealing it, said to one of his attendants, "If you go just outside the gate, you will meet a man wearing a horsehair cap and a soldier's uniform. Call him in. He is standing there ready to be summoned." He was called in, and sure enough he was a Kan Yun No, servant of the gods. He came in and at once prostrated himself before Yun. Yun said, "My sister has just now died in such a place in Chula province. Take this letter and go at once. I shall expect you back tonight with the answer. The matter is of such great importance that if you do not bring it as I order, and within the time appointed, I shall have you punished." He replied, "I shall be in time, be not anxious." Yun then gave him the letter and the bundle, and he went outside the main gateway and disappeared. Before dark, he returned with the answer. The letter read, "She died at such an hour today, and we were in straits as to what to do when your letter came with the supplies, just as though we had seen each other. Wonderful it is." The man who brought the answer immediately went out and disappeared. The House of Mourning is situated over 10 days' journey from Seoul, but he returned ere sunset in the space of 2 or 3 hours. Imbang.
The wildcat woman Kim Soo-ik, a Seoul native who enrolled in 1624 and graduated in 1630, accompanied the king in 1636 during his escape to Namhan from the invading Manchu army. He opposed any compromise with China or treaties, but his advice went unheeded, leading him to withdraw from public life. Tong Chung-so, a notable figure from China, once secluded himself for 3 years to focus on study. During this time, a young man visited him and while waiting, remarked to himself, "It will rain today." Tong immediately responded, "If you're not a sly one, you must be quite direct. Leave at once." The man promptly fled. Tong's insight came from the saying, "Birds and trees predict wind, ground beasts know of rain." The young man inadvertently revealed his nature, likened to a wild cat. The story. Former Quelpart magistrate Kim Soo-ik resided near Seoul's South Gate. In his youth, he devoted late-night hours to studying Chinese. Once, feeling hungry, he asked his wife to bring him food. She replied, "All we have are 7 or 8 chestnuts. Should I roast them for you?" Kim agreed, saying, "Sure, bring them over." The servants were asleep, and there was no one available to answer a call, so the wife went to the kitchen, made a fire, and cooked the meal herself. Kim waited patiently for her to return. After a while, she brought the food in a handbasket, freshly cooked and served for him. Kim enjoyed the meal greatly. Meanwhile, she sat before his desk and waited. Suddenly, the door opened, and another person entered. Kim looked up and saw an exact duplicate of his wife carrying a basket of roasted chestnuts. Under the light, both women looked identical. They stared at each other in surprise, asking, "What's happening? Who are you?" Kim received the roasted nuts again, set them down, and then firmly grasped each woman, the first with his right hand and the second with his left, holding them tightly until daybreak. As the cocks crowed and dawn approached, the woman he held by the right hand protested, "Why are you holding me so tightly? It hurts. Let me go." She struggled and pulled, but Kim held on tighter. Eventually, after a fierce struggle, she fell to the floor and transformed suddenly into a wild cat. Startled and fearful, Kim let her go, and she escaped through the door. It was a shame he hadn't secured the beast once and for all. Note by the writer, stories of foxes transforming into women and deceiving people are found in Chinese novels like Kwang Kui, but the transformation into a wild cat is even more remarkable and unfamiliar to me. What rules govern such creatures like foxes and wild cats in their transformations? I'm at a loss to explain it. Some suggest that foxes possess magic charms enabling such transformations. But what about wildcats? Imbang.
The ill-fated priest. A scribe from Chungcheong province named Kim Kyung-jin shared this tale with me. He said, "Back in 1640, while I was traveling near Bighorn Bridge in Tain County, I encountered a scholar and his 4 or 5 servants. They were all lying unconscious by the riverside after some mishap. When I inquired about their condition, they eventually explained, 'We were having our lunch by the road when a Buddhist priest passed by. He was haughty and didn't acknowledge us. One servant, offended by the disrespect, called out to him. The priest responded by striking him with his staff, and when the others tried to intervene, he beat them too, leaving them all incapacitated. He then turned to the scholar and chastised him, saying, 'Since you didn't correct your servants for their rudeness to me, I'll have to punish you as well.' He struck the scholar repeatedly, causing him to collapse. I saw the priest a short distance ahead. At that moment, a military officer who looked about 40 years old approached. He was thin and appeared weak. He rode a gaunt pony and was followed by a boy carrying his hat cover and archery gear. Upon reaching the stream and seeing the distressed group, he asked what had happened. The officer, clearly upset, explained, 'That insolent priest, surprisingly strong, has assaulted my attendants and me.' 'Indeed,' the stranger declared, 'I've known about him for quite some time and have resolved to remove him from this world, yet I've never had the chance until now. Having finally encountered him, I'm set on resolving this matter.' With that, he got off his horse, adjusted his saddle, armed himself with his bow and a specially tipped arrow, and chased after the clergyman at full speed. He quickly caught up to him. As the clergyman glanced back, the archer released his arrow, striking him deeply in the torso. He then got down, unsheathed his sword, and incapacitated the clergyman's hands, securing him to the tail of his horse, and returned victoriously to where the scholar was waiting, proclaiming, 'He's all yours to deal with. I'm off.'" The scholar expressed his gratitude to the archer, inquired about his home and name. The archer disclosed, "I reside in Ko-chang County," but withheld his name. Observing the clergyman, the scholar noted his formidable size, but now, rendered speechless by his injuries, they left him behind and continued on their journey with a sense of triumph. Imbang.
The vision of the holy man Yi Chi-ham, Master Tojong, was known for his extraordinary deeds and insights. Shortly after his wedding, Yi Chi-ham tore his ceremonial coat into bandages for a sick child he encountered, showing his selfless compassion. He once foresaw a calamity befalling his father-in-law's home and preemptively moved his wife away. The following year, the family was indeed wiped out due to political reasons. Yi Chi-ham possessed not only prophetic abilities but also magical powers, notably controlling the seas as he sailed peacefully across them for extended voyages. He practiced extreme asceticism, enduring long periods without food or water and ignoring physical pain, such as walking with blistered feet without flinching. In his youth, he studied under the famous Taoist So Wadam, adopting a humble lifestyle despite his acquaintance with high-ranking officials. He engaged in mystical practices, such as using gourd cups to control winds during his travels to and from Quelpart. Yi Chi-ham engaged in commerce, amassed wealth, and used it to help the poor, including providing land that yielded rice for distribution. Known as Mud Pavilion, he lived simply in a dugout in Seoul, using a metal cap to cook his food, wearing wooden shoes, and riding a pack saddle. During his tenure as magistrate in Asan County, he built homes for the needy and encouraged them to work and thrive, even teaching them crafts like weaving straw shoes. Despite criticism from Yulgok for being too idealistic, Yi Chi-ham remained steadfast, asserting his worth and contributions to society. Source: Korea's Record of Famous Men. Teacher Tojong was once a merchant who traveled as far as the East Sea in his business ventures. One night, he stayed in a fishing village by the shore. During his stay, another traveler, known as a holy man, arrived. The three of them met and conversed until late into the night. The host, the holy man, and Tojong. The night was exceptionally clear and calm. At one point, the holy man gazed out over the water and suddenly became greatly alarmed, exclaiming, "A terrible event is imminent." His companions, startled by his demeanor, asked him to explain. He warned them, "In about 2 hours, a tidal wave will sweep over this village, destroying everything in its path. If you don't hurry to safety, we will be caught like fish in a net." Tojong, somewhat knowledgeable in astrology, tried to comprehend the situation but couldn't find an explanation. The homeowner refused to believe the warning and declined to prepare for escape. Nevertheless, the holy man persisted, suggesting, "Even if you doubt my words, let us climb a little way up the mountain behind us. If I am wrong, we can return, and no harm will be done. If you still distrust me, leave your belongings and let the people come away." Tojong was intrigued, though perplexed. Eventually, the homeowner agreed to the plan and gathered his family and a few essentials to follow the holy man up the hill. They ascended to the summit for safety, as the holy man advised. Tojong, however, chose to remain halfway up the mountain and asked the holy man if this location would be safe. The holy man replied, "Others would not escape if they stayed where you are, but you will only be frightened and survive." As dawn approached, true to the holy man's warning, the sea surged suddenly, flooding the village and reaching the mountainside where Tojong stood. The entire coastal town was submerged. When daylight returned, the waters receded. Tojong bowed to the holy man and asked to become his disciple. The holy man, modestly disclaiming any special knowledge, attributed his foresight to chance. He was not one to boast of his abilities. Tojong inquired about where the holy man lived, but when he sought him out the next day, the house was empty, and the holy man was nowhere to be found. Imbang.